Hi and welcome to another episode of Delaware County Political News, Meet the Expert. I am your host, Larry DeMarco, and today we are here with Elizabeth Moro, candidate for the 7th Congressional District. Elizabeth is a Michigan native who has proudly called Pennsylvania home since 2010. As one of 12 children in a working-class home, she learned the importance of working collaboratively. She graduated summa cum laude from Western Michigan University, majoring in political science, women's studies, and public policy. She interned with the Michigan House of Representatives, worked on numerous campaigns, and created an organization encouraging women to run for public office. As a real estate broker, she built a business, led a sales office of 50 agents, and helped many people in the district achieve the dream of home ownership. She is a staunch advocate for consumer protection and local business development. She sits on the board of historic Kennett Square Economic Committee. She and her husband Vince own a small farm in Chadds Ford, and together they have 5 children. They are activists in land conservation and founded a local advocacy group for open space preservation. Elizabeth, thank you for being a guest on Delaware County Political News.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Elizabeth, for each home sold in the United States, an average of $64,000 is pumped into the local economy. Please discuss the ways that this happens.
Well, first of all, the housing market is 1/5 of the United States GDP, which I think is phenomenal. But the other underlying thing of it is, as people make a house their home, they need goods and services to do so. So that involves everything from mortgage lenders to insurance to goods and services that they'll use in their house, all the utilities and local suppliers that they might use to make improvements upon their house, restaurants, retailers that they might purchase things to fill their house. So housing and the sale of homes, the transfer of homes, is incredibly important to the local economy because very often people just go to the stores around them.
Is this preferable to renting?
Well, it depends, because some people are better off renting based on their needs. Either they can't qualify for a loan or their housing needs are temporary. So I would never say one is better or worse. It just depends on your need. However, if you look at the power of why the American dream is called the American dream, is because an individual, as they pay off their mortgage or they invest more into their house, they have an asset that they can take, buy and sell, have something real and tangible, versus when you rent, you're just paying a landowner who has the right to take your money and invest it.
Discuss the concept of subprime lending and what consumers need to know about it.
Back in 2000, before I got into real estate, housing prices soared and interest rates were very low, and so people wanted to do something with that, increase equity in their homes. A lot of people took the equity out of their homes and did things like home improvements, or they added to the value of their investment. Other people took the money out of their homes and bought second homes. They increased their quality of life because wages at that time were pretty stagnant, interest rates were low, so money was easy and free. And everything was going along really great until the housing market started to slow down. This is where subprime lending started to get a lot of attention, because people wanted the American dream. They wanted to make that possible. But some people didn't qualify for a conforming loan, or what we call a conventional loan. And what that means is loans are judged on your ability to pay it back, your ability to take the money and at the end of the term pay it off. And that's the value that investors see in the housing market, is that there's this whole market of loans that can be packaged as mortgage-backed securities, and those are, at the time, were the investors' dream. They would buy these up, and the demand for mortgage-backed securities was incredibly intense in this time. So investors kept demanding more. Banks wanted to loan more so that they could sell more loans, and practices got a little crazy. People were not being asked to verify their answers, and so you had people that were more risky. So subprime lending still exists. today, but it's less likely because of the new regulations that have been put in place. And the American people have seen the effects of subprime lending and are a little bit more cautious about it.
Which ultimately led to the bubble breakdown.
Correct. When I entered real estate at the point that the bubble had broken, and I got to see the effects of subprime lending, where individuals were allowed to buy homes that they couldn't afford, or they could afford initially, and they had maybe a 5-year arm where the interest rate was low when they first bought, but then after 5 years it went up. And what happened here was, as housing values started to drop and interest rates on these ARM mortgages started to go up, people could no longer afford them. But then the flip side was, because your house wasn't worth what you bought it for, people were now underwater. So I got to see the effects of predatory lending and how damaging it is on our communities. Sitting across from homeowners who wanted to be able to get out from underneath their mortgages and realized they could not, because either their houses were not worth what they purchased, or the market wasn't looking for a house of that caliber because everyone was reeling.
On a national scale, how forgiving were the banks to people who went under during that crisis, that housing crisis?
There was a period where banks were trying to, kind of duck and cover because they realized what was happening here. There were a couple things. The foreclosure process took a while, so people would stay in their homes for a length of time until the bank could do a real estate owned transaction. Other people left. They just defaulted on their mortgages. And once the government got involved and started to rescue the system, there was a period where homeowners could refinance under the HARP program that was set up, that they could go back and refinance the houses that they had, or refinance their mortgages so they could keep their houses.
You were a realtor during this housing bubble breakdown we're
Yes.
discussing. Congress has been seeking ways to effectively gut the key portions of DoddFrank that prevent such a problem. Could we be on the cusp of another 2008 financial breakdown?
The thing that a lot of people talk about with DoddFrank is that it's an 800-page document full of different points of regulation, and that seems cumbersome. And when I sign a real estate, start a real estate transaction, I tell consumers there's going to be about 800 pages from the beginning of the agreement to signing for your mortgage. And that is cumbersome, but the sense is that each of those papers exists because somebody broke a law. And I'm a huge advocate for consumer protection. The Obama administration set up the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau under Dodd-Frank to make sure consumers are now aware of what they are signing up for. It lists who all the members of the transaction are, and it created a whole new closing document that has to be sent to the buyer prior to closing so that they have a chance to review the numbers before they sign. Before the fraudulent business practices that were taking place, consumers were being tricked into signing documents not fully understanding what they were signing up for. And I think while we want to have a balance of good regulation and smart business practices, the fact that in 1980 during the S&L scandals, 800 senior bankers went to jail, and during this housing crisis in the 2007-2008, no one went to jail. So they're still out there able to do business, and that's my concern, is that when you don't have any accountability for what was done to consumers, there's a chance to repeat it because there's the vision that they can still make money.
The Republicans believe that we've become over-regulated. What is your view?
I think right now we are just in the recovery mode. The Democrats have done the heavy lifting of putting in place the regulations, and I think it's way too early to start loosening those strings. Just last year, Wells Fargo had a big investigation going on because of their fraudulent activity. This doesn't just affect the mortgage industry, this affects the financial industry as a whole, where there are certain institutions that create benchmarks for the employees to reach certain numbers in order to be rewarded with bonuses. And that's what was happening at Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo employees were opening bogus accounts on behalf of clients in order to reach their benchmarks. Well, when it was discovered, these are millions of accounts that were open, and consumers were fined for accounts that they didn't even know existed. And so the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau needed to get involved there, again, to protect consumer interests. Whenever profit is put before people, that's where we're going to see fraud. And I think right now, I am not confident that we are beyond the area of fraud where Wall Street has to stay in check with Main Street. And we can never let Wall Street take over our market in the way that it did, where the American dream actually became the American nightmare for too many people.
But Elizabeth, 80 pages of signatures, is that how many you said?
No, it's 800 pieces of paper in between the whole process, because there's just a number of things that need to be verified now for a conforming loan.
But isn't that part of Trump's positive platform, in that he wants to deregulate and make the sale of a house simpler and less cumbersome, rather than 800 pages to go through?
I guess I go back to what I said before.
Do people really read those pages, Elizabeth?
They have to understand that what they're entering into, and I think what happened before was the process was moving too fast, money was too easy, that it really created a situation where consumers were not being protected. There is an ongoing process right now called Whack the Stack, and as realtors, and my job was to oversee the paperwork that was put forth from my agents. And it's important to make sure you're using all the appropriate documents, because you can be fined if you are not presenting the consumers with all those documents. And it's not just related to mortgage, it's related to our ability to call. Like the FEC requires that we get permission to call consumers with different things like that. So it's not entirely all related to mortgage, but a lot of it is.
Many college graduates are hamstrung with crippling debt. How does this affect access to home ownership, and what are some potential solutions to the out-of-control costs of higher education?
I think I just took my first child to college, so I understand full well about the expense of college. And one of the things as we explored colleges, something I know every family out there is doing, is you look at all your options as far as what's affordable. And in-state obviously is more affordable than out-of-state. But I think there's such a push right now for every child to get a college education, and we're overlooking opportunities such as community colleges and vocational education schools. I know in my industry we're looking for the trades. We need people who can do the trades like bricklayers and plumbers and electricians. And those are areas where some people don't look necessarily because the push for college is so great. It doesn't do our kids a great service to bring them out of college with loads of debt, which is why as a student myself, I took advantage of Pell Grants and guaranteed student loans that had interest deferment, which made it a little bit easier to pay them off, scholarships and other things that can be offered by the colleges and private industries. But I'm a big advocate to make sure that our federal government continues to provide Pell Grants and assistance to kids who do want to go to college so that they don't come out with heavy debt. It does affect their ability to buy a house, but debt is not necessarily always a bad thing, because you're establishing your credit rating, which is a big part of when you go to apply for a mortgage. You want to have a strong credit rating. I think in the process of what I've seen in the housing market is the type of homes we're building typically are the bigger homes that make more money for the builder. But what I'm seeing in our current housing market here in Delaware County, we have just a tail over 3 months supply of inventory. And what that means is it takes us 3 months for the market to absorb those homes. And a balanced market is right around 4. And right now it's a seller's market, so there's not enough inventory in the first place. But the median price of the home that sold was $189,000 last year in Delaware County. Then look at the type of homes that are being built. That's a correlation. We need to be making sure that we're building affordable housing for college students as well.
So 189,000, isn't that affordable? Isn't that a positive thing?
That is affordable, but then you have to consider the type of homes that are being built and the development that you see around our area. It doesn't reflect that.
I understand you have been active in your community's environmental efforts. Tell us about that.
Well, one of the things as a realtor that I've seen is I get to see the power of good schools, the power of taxation on a local community, the power of a strong economy. But I also know that quality of life is reflective to our environment, and we live in a beautiful area with open space preservation projects happening. We have streams and waterways we want to protect. So my husband and I were involved in a program about 2 years ago where we helped save a local apple orchard that had been around for quite a long time that was going to be developed. Now this apple orchard had 200 apple trees, and we helped bridge the gap through fundraising for that apple orchard. Following that, individuals came to us and said, well, what are you doing about Crabilly Farm? Crabilly Farm is a farm that is in Westtown Township, not even in our neighborhood, but it is a very large tract of land that is a part of the Brandywine battlefield. Well, a large home developer was looking to come in and take that large tract of land and put about 317 homes on it. And not only would that decrease the quality of life as far as traffic, and it would congest the schools in the area, but it also had environmental impacts where the impervious surfaces would drain water into our local runways and waterways, so that the Brandywine River, which is nearby, and some of the neighboring creeks could have substantial effects from that. And we decided to form a group to give the people a voice. We started Neighbors for Crabilly, which allowed all the neighboring townships to have a voice in the process. We weren't going after the landowner, they had a right to sell, and we weren't going after the developer because they had a right to do business in the area. But what we were challenging was the local municipal government, who had let their master plan expire by 16 years and hadn't done anything to protect this large tract of land, which was the last bastion of open space for this township. So we organized the effort, raised money, formed an LLC, hired legal counsel and experts who could testify to the township, and just at the end of December they voted 3-0 to deny the project. That doesn't mean it's over. It's far from over, and there will probably be further battles ahead. But what we were inspired by was the power of the people to come together and fight for what they believed was a really special place in our community, but also to encourage local conservancies to consider becoming part of helping save this property as well.
Watching the news is depressing. You're an advocate. What can people do to improve society?
Well, Bill Gates just took over Time magazine, it's in the newsstands right now, about why he's still an optimist. And I think the things that are good about our world are long-term. Childhood deaths across the world are going down. He said, if you look at America over the last 100 years and all the things that we have developed as a nation and the growth that has happened, it's really tremendous. And it's exciting to think about in our area the green technology and the new jobs that are on the cusp of coming our way. Yes, there is a lot of work to do. This current administration has changed the tone of America in a very negative way, and I feel like we spend a tremendous amount of time talking about that versus what we can do to be the change. And that is why I'm getting engaged in politics again, to be part of the change and to begin to raise my voice beyond just real estate, beyond just protecting the American consumer, is to take my beliefs of a fundamentally sound market and to take it to Washington.
Elizabeth, you're running for Congress this year. What inspired you to run?
Well, as a young girl, I grew up in Michigan. I was the 11th of 12 kids, and I think I was the only kid that caught the political bug. I had 8 brothers, and I always say I've been fighting for human rights my whole life. But my father and I would watch the conventions on TV, and we had those. I know this is going to be a big jump for millennials, but we had vinyl records of President Kennedy's speeches. And although he died a decade before I was born, it was still, his words hit an inspired chord within me that put in place in my heart the desire to serve my country. And I still think America is an amazing country to be a part of, and I want to serve this country. In my role as a real estate broker, I get to see firsthand what is happening on Main Street and saw the effects of what happened with the last housing crisis, where the American dream became an American nightmare. And as we move to an area of relaxing those regulations, I want to make sure someone's in Congress who's willing to stand up for the consumers and make sure our interests are protected, but not only just our housing interests, but to make sure our quality of life interests are addressed, that we continue to build our communities with strong schools, infrastructures, jobs, that our environment is protected. And one of the things I've been active in is land preservation. And believe it or not, developing land doesn't add more to the local economy. Actually, keeping open space does. And so I will continually advocate for the environment and for awareness of climate change and protection of our resources.
Elizabeth, I wish you the best of luck, and I thank you for being a guest on Delaware County Political News.
Thank you so much.
We have been here with Elizabeth Moro, and I am your host, Larry DeMarco. If you like this video, please forward the link to all the people on your contact lists and Facebook friends. We are signing off. Tune in next time. Bye for now.